Okay, here's this week's tale. But first, somebody sent me an email and asked me how it was that I ended up on this site. I thought that was a pretty good question. I was posted at a site and there was a guy that worked there named Larry. Now, Larry was just an interesting guy. He's really tall, like 6'4", and the very first time I saw him, he drove to work in a hearse. Turns out that his family was in the mortuary business. It's not what he did for a living, but they basically gave him the car because it couldn't be used anymore for anything else, and it was so big that it accommodated him well because he was a really big guy. Anyway, he had a very funny, odd sense of humor and kind of macabre, and he's really smart and he had a lot of really interesting stories. He was a history, helped teach history at one of the local colleges, so he was a big history buff, knew all sorts of interesting things. He sent me a link to this email for this site, and I signed up on a lark, and I didn't really pay much attention to it for the first few months after I signed up, because I kept getting those, meet me email things on my email. I didn't really think much about it. Well, about a little more than a month ago, Larry passed away. He died suddenly in his sleep. He had sleep apnea, and they figured that he either forgot to hook up his machine before he fell asleep, or he just figured he didn't need it that night. No way of ever knowing now, because he's gone. But like I said, Larry had a lot of really good tales, and it made me think. A couple weeks later, I'm talking to my friend Ray, whose picture you can see on the website, and we were talking about stuff that happened to us, and it dawned on me that, it's kind of like that old saying about if a tree falls in the forest, if no one's there to hear it, does it make a noise? Well, if nobody knows your tales, then did they happen? Hard to say. Anyway, that's what kind of gave me the idea to do this. So, here's this week's tale improper. Now, last week I made mention about how when you were a kid, at least when I was a kid and growing up in the time I grew up, you were taught not to complain about when you hurt yourself. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but like when my niece and nephew came along, my sister had these little plastic fish that were filled with a gel that she used to keep in the freezer. They were boo-boo fish. And every time the kids scraped themselves up, you go grab some boo-boo fish and put it on there, and it made the kids feel better. Didn't have that when I was a kid. Basically, when I was a kid and you hurt yourself, you just didn't complain about it. An example of that is, my dad's a mechanic. I was helping him work in the garage one day. I had my hand on something and it slipped and I cut my hand a little bit. And I looked at my dad and he looked at me and said, "Don't be a punk about that." So I was like, okay. A couple hours go by. We're pretty much finished up, washing up. It's like, "Dad, should I go put something on this? Like, clean it off or something?" He said, and he goes to me and says, "What'd I say?" It's like, okay, don't complain. Now, flash forward years later, I'm in college. One of the things I studied in college was philosophy. There was a philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche, and one of the things he said was that which does not kill you makes you stronger. So in a way, my dad was kind of right. The things that happen to you in life, good and bad, shape who you become when you become an adult. So that's my tale for this week. Remember, the world's a better place when we all share.